If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
So let's continue our discussion on the first topic, data model. So what we are discussing yesterday. So the last topic that we are discussing about the type of the storage modes. Okay. So one, we talked about reuse mode. Reuse mode in the sense, so basically what happens is, in case of there are two type of storage modes. Okay. How your data gets stored into your MDG staging tables. So that basically divided into there are two type of modes. So one, we are talking about the reuse mode. Okay. So reuse mode in the sense, so let's say for example, this is your MDG system. So this is your ERP layer or ECC, the ECC or S4 system. On top of that one, we activated MDG component. Okay, so you have your staging table over here, and at the same time, you also have our activated tables. So user will log into MDG UI application, and they'll enter the data and hit the submit button. So the data gets stored into a staging table. So here, when the record gets stored into the staging table initially, so as long as this record is available in staging, so we call this is our inactive area, or else we also call this record as inactive record. Okay, so because this record is not yet finalized, this is being reviewed by some group. So then once this record gets activated, which means the final approves this particular request, then that is the time this record will be moved from your staging area to active area. So this we call it as a active area. This we call it as a staging area. Okay. So this type of storage mode, we call it as a reuse mode, because in case of reuse mode, your active data gets stored into the your actual ECC tables, the tables that used to store your master data like MARA, MARCI, MARM, MVKE, MBEW, that is for material master. In case of customer master, KNA1, KNB1, KNVK. For vendor master, LFA1, LFB1. So those are the standard tables that are already comes as part of your ERP. So the active records get stored into that one. So this type of mode, we call it as a reuse mode. So similarly, we also talk about something called flex mode. Okay, so in case of flex mode, what happens is initially the inactive record gets stored into your staging area only. Okay, so then after that, after the record gets activated, right? So initially you have a inactive record over here, inactive record. Okay, and after once the final approver approves that particular request, then what happens, that inactive record will turn into active record, just like your reuse mode only. But what is the difference is where the active record gets stored. So that is a difference. So here in case of flex mode, the active record gets stored into your staging table only. It won't automatically move to your underlying the actual tables. So this type of mode, we call it as a flex mode. So because the same staging table is flexible enough to store your inactive record initially, then once the request get approved or activated, so this the inactive record will turn into active record. Okay, so there is a flag, basically technically speaking, there is a flag in your staging table. So the flag has values 0 and 1. Okay, so 0 and 1. Okay, so these are the possible values. When for the inactive record, so the value will be 0. So when I say it's an active record, so the value will to change from 0 to 1. Okay, so that is the only difference. We will see how the staging table look like and what are the important fields in the staging table. So we'll see that one today. Okay, so but this is what the flex mode. As we discussed yesterday, your material master, business partners, finance objects, even article master, and in plant maintenance, we call that model as EAM, enterprise asset management. So all these objects, whatever out of box you get, right? So everything designed in a reuse mode technique, except finance. Sorry, here not finance. Here finance will come into this one, this side. Okay, except finance, everything will be reuse mode, which means if I'm creating a material, then initially the record gets stored into my staging table. Once I approve that request, or the final approver approves that request, then this record will move to automatically to the underlying ECC layer. Okay, so similarly, the same case with BP customer vendor also. So initially the data gets stored over here, and then it will move to the active area. Okay, once the final approver approves that record. If they reject this record, what happens? The record from your staging table will get deleted. Okay, so that's how the behavior. And these all these four models are four masters designed in such a way that it should always go with reuse mode only. You cannot change the pattern for this one. Similarly, for finance, it always flex mode, which means initially when you're creating a cost center, profit center, it will get stored into your staging table. And once the final approval approves, or once the record get activated, so the inactive record will turn into active record, and active record also gets stored into your flex mode only. Okay, so finance objects like your cost center, profit center, GL account, everything always gets stored or uses the same pattern, flex mode. Okay, then how I will get the data into my active area, into this system, the actual backend tables. You need to configure additional data replication. It's a additional replication that you need to configure to move the data from here to here. Basically, data replication is a topic, one of the topic that we are going to discuss later. So this data replication topic deals with moving your data from one system to other system. So in typical MDG, right? So you have your MDG system. This is your MDG system, and you have your target systems or transactional systems. Okay, so now when you're replicate, I need my master data in these systems basically, but I'm creating the master data in this particular system. So you need, once the master data gets created in the system, you need to replicate the data to the respective target systems, right? So this is what we call this entire replicate, this pushing the data from MDG to the respective target systems, right? So that process we call it as a data replication. Okay, now the same way here, in case of flex mode, the underlying tables doesn't have the master data, right? So I need to configure, just like how I'm configuring the replication to the target systems, I need to do a self replication. That means you need to replicate the data. Additionally, this is an additional replication you need to take care in case of flex models, if at all you need this particular data into this particular tables. Whereas in case of reuse mode, this process automatically happens. You no need to configure any additional replication. Okay, so that is about the reuse mode versus flex mode concept. Any questions?
Okay.
Yep. So if no further questions, so in the data
Uh,
model,
for
yep.
finance, why we are using Flex more
Oh,
particularly?
okay. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So yeah. So basically, the reason, first thing is, uh, if you look at the other objects, right? These objects compared to finance object, so these objects doesn't have any time dependency parameters. Okay, so I can create a material and I'll use it. But whereas in case of finance object, whenever you're creating a finance object, so it is also associated with something called validity period. When I create a cost center, right? So what is the validity period of this particular cost center? It can be valid for next 1 month, or I can create a cost center which is valid from 1st October to 31st October, or else it's from January 2024 to December 2024. So whenever you create any finance object, it's a cost center, profit center, GL account, or anything. So usually we will associate a time dependency. Now what happens is, in the advantage that we get using this flex mode for finance objects. So let's say, for example, uh, you are setting up an plant, or probably you are setting up a plant. Okay, and to run this particular plant, you need cost center, profit center, maybe some GL account, all these finance elements you need it. Okay, so These objects, basically, I need these objects, let's say from 1st October 23 to onwards, it should be available in my, this is my MDG system. So this is my target system, transaction system. So I need all these objects in this particular transactional system from this particular so and so date. Okay. Now today, sometime like in September, so I'll create these objects in my MDG. So this is my MDG system. Okay. And this is my target system. Okay, so I create these cost center, profit center, and GL account, all these objects in my MDG system, and I wanted to keep these objects, because if I push this data to the target systems, right? I wanted the business requirement is this data has to be available on this so and so date. So though I create these objects today, but I will keep it in my staging area only, all these objects, and I will on 1st of October, I will replicate all these objects together. Okay, so in finance, you have a concept called addition. We will discuss this addition concept when we are talking about the finance thing. So what happens, unlike your material and other objects, right? So I create a material, and once the record get activated, automatically the replication will takes place and the data will be pushed to the target system. Whereas in case of finance, right? So once you create these objects and once you approve these objects, so this data will get activated, but the active records will be there in my staging table only. And only when for every object that I create in finance, that will be associated with this addition. Okay, so now this is a parent. Under this particular parent edition, I'll have all these objects: one cost center, one profit center, one GL account. So now the replication will be controlled by this edition. Though these objects got created and activated, then the active records will be there in my staging only. So when I release this particular edition, in my MDG system, or else I will schedule a kind of this one, that this should released automatically on 1st of October. So when I release this edition, that is the time all these underlying objects will be replicated to the target system. Okay, so that means though your object is got created and it is active, you need to store in your staging area for some more time, and then when a particular instance or when a particular event occurred, that means your edition released, that is the time I wanted to replicate this data. Okay, so that way, just to control that one, SAP come up with this kind of flex where you will store your data in a staging for some more time. Is this clear?
Yes, so basically it gives us more control, right, in flex mode
Yes,
on data.
exactly. Mhm.
One more doubt, when the in the flex mode, when data moves from the MDG to ECC or ERP, so
Mhm.
the active records get deleted like in reuse mode, or it is still there in staging area?
It will be there. The active records will be there in your staging.
It will not get removed.
It won't
Once
get
it's
removed. Only in case of reuse mode, the record will get removed. But in case of flex mode, the inactive record will turn into active record, and then active record will stay in staging tables only.
okay, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so this is one difference. Okay, now coming back to how you are in case of reuse mode, right? How your the edit process works. Okay, so let me explain this. So this is your MDG component, and this is your the underlying ECC layer. So you have your active database table, and this is your staging area. So initially, I'm just taking of example of material creation. So user logged into MDG system, and he entered all the material data. He submitted the request. Then the data gets stored into this particular staging table. Okay, now this, so it's an inactive record. This is an inactive record. Okay, now after activation, that means after final approval, what we discussed is this data will be moved from inactive staging area to the active area. Okay, so let's say for example the material number 100 got created here. Now this record will get deleted from here. Now what happens is someone wants to do some changes to this 100 material. Then they will log into the MDG UI, and just like you see here, let me show you here. So NWBC, because technically you need to understand how, where, at what point of time the data gets stored into staging tables. Okay, so one is during your create scenario, so the data will be stored, and once the record got activated or approved, the data will be moved to your underlying tables. Now this is my MDG search application. When I search my data, okay, so then what happens, you see all this bunch of materials over here based on your search criteria. So this data, it is showing from your combination of both your active data and inactive data. Okay, so that means basically what happens is it will search your Mara Marcy tables, and it will fetch the data and show you. So during the data search results, right, so during your search process, it doesn't insert anything into your staging table. It will just fetch the records from your Mara Marcia, the active area tables. Along with that one, if there are any staging records are also there, it will get the staging data. Both the results it will show you here. The combined result it will show you over here. Okay. Now, after this, I wanted to edit this record. Okay, let's say this 23 record. Even when I click on this 23, it will show me the record in a display mode. This is just like your MM03. Okay, so this point of time also, the record, it is showing this data by fetching the result record from your active area table only. When I click on edit button here, okay, I wanted to edit this data, right? So when I click on edit button, and once I do all the changes and click on save or submit button, that is the time what happens is this particular record will again get loaded into your staging, because now you are trying to edit that record. Always the edit means you are initiating some change process for this material, so it will fetch the data. That is the time where it will load your 100 the material number into again into staging area. And here on this particular record, the data will be, you can user whatever user can change, right? So those changes user can do on this staging record. So assume that he changed the description. Initially, the description is ABC, material description. Now he changed the XYZ. So in my active record, I always still have the description as ABC only. Okay, and but my staging record, inactive record, will have this XYZ, the description, because the record that is there in the staging, it is not yet finalized. Someone is just initiated a change process. It has to reviewed, approved by other authorities, other person. Then once they approve that request, or once they finally approve that request, that is the time again this record will override the values into with the record that is already available in your Mara table. That means your ABC will change with XYZ. Okay, so that's how your change process works. And again, this time this record will get deleted once it is finalized the changes. Assume that approver feels that this change is not required. He can reject this request or he can discard this request. That time your staging record will be deleted from staging area, but on the active area you will still have the old record only with the ABC description. So that's the advantage you get, because the working record will be in a separate table, staging table, and your actual record will be in your the actual master data table. So because the changes that is being made currently in the inactive record, that may approve or may not approve. So we cannot go with that assumption that okay, this will always will get approved and these changes will get reflected. Sometimes the record can get rejected as well. So until that record get approved, so we will say our active record, the record of original record is this one only, the one which you have in your active area table. Clear? Okay.
Yes.
So Now you can see here some the same thing that we discussed, staging versus staging modes, flex versus reuse mode. On the right hand side you see there is a active area, okay, and this is your staging table. Now after activation in the sense, once the final approver approves, no matter how many levels of approval you have, approver 1, approver 2, approver 3, at the final approver approves that request, we will initiate something called activation process. That activation process is take care of moving the data from your staging to your active area. So that's what it says here, activation. At the time of activation, your staging record will be automatically moved to your active area. Whereas in case of reflex mode, right? So actually, this diagram little bit misleading. This is one single staging table only. There is no two separate ones. It's a single staging table only. This is your staging area, and this is your active area. Okay. So the inactive record will turn in after active at the time of activation process. Your inactive record with zero indicator will turn into one. That's it. Okay, in the same staging table. Then, if at all you need to move the data from your staging area to your active area, you need a additional replication. Just like how you are configuring replication to the target system, so you also need to configure a self replication to the same system to move the data from your staging table to active tables. Okay, so this is what about the flex versus reuse. Okay, so
Is it possible that the active area is not moved from staging tables to ERP? Means, in UI, it is showing different data, and in the backend tables, it is showing different data.
no, I didn't understand your question. Can you come again?
I mean, sometimes that activation happens, but in the backend, if some issues comes, right? So in the UI, MDG UI, there is a different data, and in the backend table, the data is not reflected correctly, or it is showing the old data only. So,
No, it won't. That is not a. See, there might be. Let's say, for example, now this I'm opening in MDG UI in a display mode. This particular material. So this one always fetches the data from my the active record wherever my active record is there. In case of reuse mode, it will fetch the data from your Mara Marcy, that active area table. In case of finance mode, it will get the data from my staging record, the active record from my staging area. So there is no question of having a different data showing over here versus the data that I have, the active record that I have in my backend table. That never possible. But what is possible is your activation process can get failed. Okay, so that is possible. Okay, that means what happens, let me show you here. So you have your staging record, and this is your active area. So initially the material number is ABC. Okay, so you have the material in staging area, you change the description to XYZ, and this record got activated, also approved, final approved. Now ideally there is, we call it as something called activation process. So during the activation process, ideally this should ABC should replace with XYZ. But sometimes what happens is your activation process may get failed. Okay, due to some any reason, maybe because of this connectivity issue or something, like because of any some reason, this process might get failed. So that means when I say this process got failed, then that means this record is not updated in my stage active area. That means in my active area still I will have my old record only. So this type of cases we need to handle as an MDG technical or the functional resources, right? So business says that, okay, I change the description of this particular material via this particular request, and but I'm not able to see those changes in my when I open this particular material. Then you can trace back that, okay, take that request and look at why this is, whether that request is approved or not, are there any activation failures or not. So that technically you need to troubleshoot and take care of that, why this got failed. Okay, so that we will discuss during I mean in the coming sessions, how we can troubleshoot and all those things. But that in case of if activation get failed, you will still see the old record on your active area. So when I open my UI this to see this particular material, right, it will always show the description as ABC only. But ultimately, whatever the data that is there in my active area, so the same data will get displayed over here. Clear?
Yeah, got it.
Akshay, yeah, for the flex case, we have two process, right? One is the activation and one is the replication, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
is that might be possible that activation got completed, but replication of the data in the actual tables got failed. That might be
Yeah.
the case, right?
Exactly. That might be the case. So that means what you are saying is, let me take uh, another example. So in case of flex mode, okay, so your activation got success,
Hmm.
activation, right? But
Right.
the so this is your active area, but here this is a replication. So this replication might get failed. Okay, this replication might get failed. Now on the UI, it always MDG UI. If you open your cost center or profit center, whatever the the flex record, so
Hmm.
this always fetches the data from your staging active. It will look at the active record from your staging table only. So ultimately, since this activation got successful, I will see the latest data over here. But if you open the GUI transaction to see the cost center, profit center, just like we have MM03, the display transaction, right? So I don't
Right.
know what is the transaction for cost center or profit center, the GUI transaction. If you open up that GUI transaction, because this is nothing to do with your MDG, it will always look at your the standard tables. And when you try to open this request, it will fetch the data from here, active area. So in this case, here you will see a old record. If you open in MDG UI, it will show you the latest record.
Right.
Okay.
So in that case, we can easily identify that activation is completed because the staging table showing the active records
Mm.
only. So
Yeah.
we can directly focus on the replication methodology, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can, so the issue can happen at your activation level or at your
Hmm.
replication level. So
Hmm.
those are the points where we need to actually go step by step approach when something you
Hmm.
are troubleshooting, right? Okay, first whether this request is approved or not. Okay, it is approved. Whether this request activation was successful or not. And after that, okay, activation is done. Whether this request got replicated successfully or not. Okay, even in replication also, if you take about the target system, so what happens, your outbound replication might get successful if you open that in this system, but maybe there it might get failed in the inbound process in the target system. So you need to see all those failure points and go step by step approach to find out where the issue is.
Right.
Okay, so fine. Then after this, okay. So let's now look into that, get into the system basically. So once you log into any MDG system, right? So just like your SAP system, all the configurations we do, there is a transaction code, okay, to do all MDG related configurations. So basically, the configuration will be under SPRO. You could open this SPRO. Under SPRO, cross application components, then process and tools for enterprise application, master data governance. When you expand this, central governance. Okay, so this is the place where you have the all the required configuration. Okay, so here you can see general settings and some settings with respect to each object, each standard object. So settings for material, for customer, supplier, partner, finance objects, contract account is also part of your BP. Okay, and when you expand these general settings, you will see all these your data model, UI modeling, your workflows you will configure over here, your applications you configure over here. Okay, so your rules, validation, business rules, search application, duplicate check, everything you configure over here. So everything under this particular general settings. Okay, so if you look at this path, right? So this is a little lengthy path where you need to travel right from SPRO till to reach this position. So there is a shortcut T code also. So always we will use MDG IMG. The transaction code is MDG IMG, which will directly take you to this configuration. You no need to go from SPRO, cross application component, process and tools, and then master data, and then central governance, all those things. It is not required. You can just always use this shortcut, the T code MDG IMG. So 90% of the configuration, not 90, 99% of the configuration we do under this one only. Whether it is a technical configuration, functional configuration, anything we can do under this MDG IMG. Okay, and one advantage with the technical folks is especially with respect to MDG, when you're working on any MDG projects. So in MDG, you say 70% of the configuration is like a technical configuration, in the sense where you need to implement the baddies. The data model is also, it's purely technical. Your UI configurations are technical. Okay, so workflows also. So all these things are basically comes under technical part, and there is little bit of, usually you say some 20-30%, that is usually the functional config, functional folks will do. So the point is, whatever the functional can do, that 20% or 30% configurations, that can be done by MDG technical also. Because see, ultimately, if you know this entire configurations, this all these configuration, that is done. Our entire course, whatever the topics that we are going to discuss, that is revolves around this particular configurations only. So you can do, as a technical person, you can do all these configurations. Okay, but for the functional, right, they cannot do everything. Like there are baddies are there, functional cannot implement baddie, they cannot write the code. Data model topic is there, UI developments are there. Okay, so all these things, maybe they know the concept, but they cannot do on their own. They need a technical dependency. Whereas for the technical persons, they can do end to end with respect to MDG, everything they can do the configurations. Okay, fine. Now coming back to, so you see here, this got divided, basically broadly categorized into two things. One is general settings, the other one is your object specific settings. Again here, all the common configurations in the sense, most of the configuration we will do under the general settings only, like your data model configurations, UI, everything. Apart from that, there might be some 10% of configuration which is very specific to material master, or very specific to business partner or customer master. So for those configurations, we will actually, we will do some things over here. Okay, but most of the configurations we do under this particular general settings only. So in this one, the first topic that we have is data model. Okay, so as I said, data model topic deals with your staging area, complete staging area. Okay, so if you open this, like the staging area, this is basically ultimately in the backend, you will have a staging table. Table in the sense, just like your S11 object only, normal database table only. But what is the difference in normal modules, right? So, or in any normal case, you create a Z table, like custom table or some table, okay, for any to store some data, or else you will use the standard SAP tables. Whereas in case of MDG, those staging tables we don't create. The staging tables, we do some configurations in the data model, and finally there is a process called the activate process. So once you activate your model, automatically based on the configurations you do under this data model, staging tables will get generated automatically. Okay, so even here we never ever create or modify the tables directly by going into S11. It will be done by the standard framework only, MDG framework. Okay, all we need to do is we need to do a configuration in the data model. So here, if you look at the data model concepts, right? So at the top level, you have something called data model, which is a parent. Okay, so let me explain here. So in normal case, you have your Mara table on active area side. I'm just taking one example. Okay, so this particular Mara table you have, and you assume that you have Marcy table. Okay, in this Mara table, you have the table attributes, the fields like material number, then you have material type or material group, okay, or else industry sector. Some fields, table fields. Here also you have plant, then you have something called, let's say for example, material number also there here, and you have some plant status, some fields. I'm trying to compare this with how your data model design will look like. Okay, so these are the two tables. I'm just taking two tables with some table attributes. This is on your active area side. So corresponding to this one, to your table name, here you will have something called entity type. Entity type. Okay, so there will be something called the entity type. So the entity type, in the sense, let's say my entity type name is material. The name of the entity type is material. Material here. Okay, so this name is equivalent to just like your table name. This I will call the entity type. Under this entity type, I will have the fields, like just like how you have material number, material type, material group, you will have here material number, material group, then material type, then industry sector, just like you have some attributes. So okay, you will have some entity type, something called entity type. Under the entity type, you have these attributes. This is how we create entity type in MDG site. Similarly, corresponding to plant, I'll have, let's say for example, plant is my entity type, entity name. Under this plant, just like how we have these attributes, so I'll be having the other attributes, plant, then material number, then status, like this. Okay. Now you see in Mara and Masi, so there is a relation between these two things. The relation is, for every material that you create over here, okay, you will extend this material to some plants. So similarly here, we need to define a relationship between your material and plant. So there is something called relationship between these two entities. Relationship, you need to define the relationships. Okay, and this entire thing I will put it under something called data model. Data model. So at the top, you have a node called data model. Under data model, you have entity types. Okay, so this is one entity type, this is another entity type, and under each entity type, you have attributes. Okay, and if you have more than one entity type in your data model, you define a relationship between those entity types. So this is what this kind of configuration we do in MDG. And once you do all this, defined data model, under data model entity types, under entity types attributes, and the relation between entity types, once you do all these things, finally you activate your data model. You need to activate your data model. So when you activate your data model, that is the time system will take these entity types and attributes and the relationships. Accordingly, it will automatically generate the required staging tables for you. It will automatically generate the staging tables. You no need to give, because it knows that what are the fields are there. So system will create one staging table corresponding to your entity type. Okay, and under that staging table, it will add all these attributes. Similarly, for plant, it will create one more staging table, and it will take all these attributes. Okay, and to define the foreign key relation between the material and plant staging table, it will make use of the existing relationship. So that's how your staging tables will get generated in MDG. Okay, so you can see we'll create one data model from scratch. We will do all these things today. Okay, so if you look at the data model concepts, you have something called data model at the top level, and under data model you can create n number of entity types. Under each entity type, you have an attributes. When you are adding an attribute, just like in table, you need to mention the data elements. So here also we will mention the data element. And when you have more than one entity type, you can define with relationships. Okay, this is all about your data model. In the entire data model topic, we will be discussing all this. What are the different entity types are there? What are the different relationships are there? Everything we will discuss in the data model topic. Okay, so now just like these data models are, as I said, for material master, already the data model is already available. The name of the data model for material master is It's a name of the data model. Under this one, you have all different entity types, and under entity type, you have different attributes. Similarly, SAP already created one data model for business partner, which will include your BP plus customer plus vendor. Similarly, there is a data model already available for finance. For finance, this is already data model is available. The name of the data model is OG. So this is OG is the data model name for finance objects in MDG. This is the data model for business partners. This is the data model for material master. For article master, the data model is AR. For EAM objects, the data model name is U1. So these are the only data models that comes when you install your MDG, when you activate your MDG component. When I say out of box objects, that means SAP already created the data models for these objects, and the corresponding staging tables are already available. Okay, now if at all I need to create one plant master or custom object, right? I need to create my own data model. So that can be, let's say, for example, Z1 is my data model, custom data model. Under this data model, I need to create entity types, attributes, relationships, and finally I'll activate my data model. So system will generate staging tables for this particular data model as well. Now I will use this staging area to store my data, custom data. Okay, so let's see how the standard models look like for now. So in MDG IMG, once you expand the general settings, there is something called data model. When you expand this data model, there is something called edit data model. Click on this edit data model. Okay, so we'll go to display mode. This is the data model that is already available for finance. This is for business partner, customer, vendor. This is for material master. Article master and EAM data models, you don't find it over here. Okay, so those are you need to take a separate license. So in any training systems, at max you can get to see only these three data models from SAP. To see that article master or something, that the customer or someone has to take the license, and then basis has to activate the business function, then you will get to see those data models. And this is a S-Flight data model that SAP provided for practice purpose. That's it. Other than this, whatever you see here, starting with Y, Z, all these are the custom data models. Maybe people created for their own practice purpose. Okay, now, so as I said, let's take one example, material master data model. And under this particular data model is nothing but collection of entity types. You see, all these are the different entity types. And the here the main entity type is material. The type name of that entity type is material. This is the main entity type, material. This is corresponding to your Mara table. Okay, now as I said, one is data model at the top. Under data model you will have collection of entity types. Under entity type you will have attributes. So you can see here all these attributes are, because this reflects your Mara table. So you can see here all the attributes mostly from Mara table. You'll have your attributes like your material types. So all these attributes mostly are corresponding to your Mara table entries. You will find the attributes over here. Okay. Now there is something called relationships also. And once everything is available, right? So finally, this data model, since it's a standard data model, it's already in active state. Okay. So once you create your model, finally you need to click on activate. Then this is the time where the staging tables will get created in the system. Now, how do I see the staging tables for this one? For material master data model. Okay. So for that one, there's a report. I need to look at the transaction code, but there's a report USMD underscore data model program. Okay. Now, because it's a generated tables, right? You cannot remember that name of the table. You have to always go via this particular program. Run this program. Here you need to input your data model. Let's say in our case, data model, I wanted to see the staging table for or else you can select it from F4. And once you execute here, now it will show you what are the entity types corresponding to this entity type. What is my staging table name? If you look at the name of the staging table, this is like system generated, right? We cannot actually remember this. And these names might different from one project to another project, one system to another system, because these are generated by system. So we never ever remember the staging table names, or you never ever directly write a select star from the staging tables, because these are generated ones. Okay, so there are APIs are there which we will use to read the data from this staging table. Okay, now here I'm just taking one example here corresponding to material entity type. This is my staging table. If I double click this, it will take me to the SC11 table. Now see, this is your staging table name corresponding to your Mara table. And you will have all these attributes. And you can also see the data in the staging table. Okay, so we will talk about this in detail. As I said, there is something called USMD active, which will tell you whether this is an active record or inactive record. If you look at the domain values for this one, you have 1 and 0. Okay, so this is at very high level. What is a data model? So you need to always remember this hierarchy. Data model. Under data model, you can create entity types. Entity type 1, entity type 2, entity type 3, something like this. Okay. Under entity type, you can have attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3. Here also the same thing. Okay. Now, since you have more than one entity type, you need to define the relationships. That's it. And once finally your configuration is done, then you need to activate your data model. When you activate this data model, system will create one staging table 1, staging table 2, staging table 3. And assume that you have done all these things. And after that, you decided to add one more attribute here. You can do that one. Do add some more changes and again activate your data model. So system will adjust again those delta changes into your staging tables. Okay.
Actually, is it following the BO structure, the data model concept?
BO structure in the sense?
So in BOPF, we have the BOs, right?
No, no. I mean, that is again a different thing. But in data model, this is how it works.
Okay. So there also you have the nodes and then entities, and we'll have the attributes and the relationship between those nodes.
I mean, in a way, logically, it follows the same kind of thing, but don't try to compare with that because it is a different concept over here. See, the thing is that instead of you creating the staging tables, so SAP gave that framework, your data model framework, where you do all the configuration there and activate your data model so that the staging tables will get generated.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So now, since already the standard data models are already available over here, like MMBP and everything, right? So we cannot actually do anything with this. At max, what you can do is you can enhance these data models to include your custom attributes. That comes under your data model enhancement. Just like how you enhance your standard Mara Marcy tables, right, using append structures. So here also we need to follow a certain steps to, if at all I wanted to add some custom attributes, then you need to identify the right entity, add the custom attributes under that entity. Or else if you are creating altogether a new custom table as part of your material master, then you might need to create a altogether, add a new entity under the data model. So those scenarios comes under your data model enhancement. Okay. Now there are two use cases which we are taking. One is first, let's try to take one use case where you need to create a data model from scratch so that you will understand all the configurations when you are creating from a right from the scratch, right? So data model. So we will be touching upon each and every concept, right? So after that, once you know how to create a data model, enhancement is very easy for you. Okay, so my point is that let's take one use case which where we need to create one data model from scratch, and we will see all the go through each and every setting of the data model, and then we will generate the staging tables. This is one, and corresponding to the same data model, we will create the UI application as well, so which we will use it to store the data. Okay, so after that, then let's explore how we can actually enhance the second use case where we can enhance the standard data models. Okay, so in the project implementations, most of the time you will be 90% of the time we will be enhancing the standard data models. Very rare cases you will create a custom data models if something is not there in the standard, and you which actually request to create a custom data model, just like bringing plant creation into the governance scope. Or else someone says that I wanted to create this master data using MDG process governance scope. So then that is the time, if that is not, there is no standard object, and then you need to create a custom object. Okay, so this kind of scenario, creating a custom object, custom data model, is maybe out of 10 cases, you will find one or two cases where you need to create a custom data model. But still, if you spend time on how to create a custom data model, right, first thing is we will be touch basing each and every concept of the data model, and the second thing is enhancement will become very easy for you. Okay, so just like how you can see how others are creating here the custom data models, right, for their practice purpose. Someone created a product master, someone created a purchase info record, just like this, right? The same way we will also create one custom data model. We'll take one use case, we will create one custom data model, and then we will see each and every setting and how the staging tables are getting generated. So is that fine, that approach with everyone?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's take one use case. I'm just taking here example of same material master because everyone knows this particular concept. So instead of introducing something like purchase info record or something else, let's take a very simple use case, material master. So in general, if you look at the material master, right? So I'll go to Mara table. So here in material master, Mara is the parent table where the first material basic data gets stored into this one. Okay, so here the key is material number, and along with that one you will have all the other common generic attributes. Whatever you have over here, material type or these things, right? These are very common irrespective of your plant or sales or anything. So this is the common attributes at a material level. Now, the requirement is we wanted to create one material data. Along with that one, I wanted to extend this material to multiple plants. So when I say plant, that is equivalent to this Marcy table. Okay. So in case of Marcy, whatever the plant extents you are doing, this is with corresponding to a particular material. So here the key is the material and the plant. Okay. And along with that one, there is a plant specific attributions also there over here. Okay, so we will take the same example, similar example. I wanted to create a material. Let's say material screw is my material number. Okay, so here I'll have some attributes like material type, then so material group, then industry sector, something like this. And this same material I wanted to extend it to plant 1000, and I wanted to extend it to 2000 and 3000 plants. At plant level, I have different attribution. Okay, so this is the scenario. So we wanted to basically have a data model which will support this kind of setup. Okay, so for this one, let's take first we'll create one data model. First one data model. Okay, under this particular data model, we will take one entity which will be equivalent corresponding to your this Mara table. Okay, so you take one entity. Okay, the name of the entity I'm taking here, let's say for example product, the name of the entity. Under this entity, I'll add some attributes like material number, then product type, product group. Okay, so now after this, I will also create another entity. That entity name might be plant, let's say plant entity. Under this one, you can have some attributes, plant level attributes. Since you have more than one entity in a data model, under one data model, if you have more than one entity, you need to define the relation between these two entities. And then finally activate your data model. So when you activate this particular data model, system will generate one staging table, staging table 1 for this one with these attributes. It will generate again another staging table, okay, with these attributes. So now there will be two staging tables. One staging table will store your product, the generic attributes. Another staging table is to store your plant specific attribution. Okay, so this is the use case. So let's create first a data model. Okay, so this is my again I'm just coming opening here the same MDG IMG. Okay, so this you always need to remember this transaction code because every time we use this transaction code MDG IMG. Okay, so then general settings, data model, edit data model. Okay, so first we need to create one data model. So click on new entry. So I'll just look at the names. Okay, so we'll take one unique name. Okay, so the name of the data model, whatever the name that you are giving to your custom data model, always it should start with Z, Y, or X. So in general, right? So Z and Y namespace are reserved for customer namespace, even X as well. So you can create the data model with starting with Z, Y, X. Okay, and after that it should have a length of 2 characters only. The data model name of the data model always accepts 2 character length. So your data model name always should be like Z1, Z2, Z3, Z4, or else ZA, ZB, ZC, Y1, Y2, Y3, YA, YB, YC. So with those combinations, you can create the different data models. But hardly will have 1 or 2 custom data models, not more than that one. So we never exist with, we never have any issue with this naming thing. Okay, so that is the fixed one. So you need to always I'm just creating a data model name starting with Z, let's say for example T, and this is the description of the data model. I'll say here product master. I'm just giving it's a custom model. Okay, so this is my data model name. Okay, now here you have something called active area. Okay, so let me open in a display mode in another window. Okay, so there is something called active area. If you look at for the finance data model, this active area is blank, and for business partner, material master, other data models, there is some name defined over here, active area. So what is this active area? What happens is we discussed that in case of a reuse mode, this is your staging table, this is your active area tables. Okay, in case of reuse mode, the inactive record will turn into active. That means the data will move from your staging table to these tables. How it will, we said there is something called activation process, and this activation process will take care of moving the data from staging to active area table. So how it will be done? There is something called in the backend. Okay, in MDG, SAP come up with something called reuse area. So this is a technically a word or name that we use, but what is behind this reuse area is there is something called access class. Okay, so ultimately this access class is responsible for doing this activation process. So all the code has been written inside this access class. So that means wherever you see a reuse mode object, that should have this access class which is linked to reuse mode, and that reuse mode we are mentioning in our data model level. Okay, now look at this, the standard one, there is something called active area material is mentioned. This is a by standard SAP. Now what is the name of this access class? You can see here on the left hand side, corresponding to material, this particular class is the access class. This is responsible for giving that the reuse nature for your data model. That means inside this particular access class, it has the multiple different methods. Those methods are responsible for moving the data from your staging area to active area at the time of activation. Okay. Now, similarly, what we discussed here is if I wanted to edit the data, during the edit, this data has to be loaded into my staging table, right? So again, this access, how it is getting loaded into my staging, how system knows that it has to go through these set of tables, read the data, and insert into these staging tables only. Again, this access class will do that activity for you. So basically, your read, write, search, all these operations, whatever we do, that update, all these options, right? So all these the CRUD operations basically performed by this particular access class. Your authorizations checks whether I have an authorization to extend this particular material to a plant or not. Whatever your standard ECC authorization checks, so those checks will be performed by this access class. If you have authorization, then only it will allow you to do the changes. If you don't have authorizations, it won't allow you to do the changes. So when you are saying a reuse mode, it's just like all you also need to create this kind of access class technically. Okay, so I'll just open this class and show you some of the important methods. Okay, so here, if at all you have to say this is my access class, okay, then any Z class you have to say this is my access class. First thing is you need to create a class that has to implement minimum this interface pp underscore access. Okay, so with this interface you get some methods like for the activation process there is a method called save method. So this is the method that is responsible for your activation, moving the data from your staging record to the active area. So inside this particular method, you have all the code. So this method. Okay. So this class is exclusively SAP provided for material master. That's why you see here MAT. So this particular class is associated with your data model, data model. So inside this particular, all these methods, you will see the reference related to the related data model related entities, attributes, and everything. So this is very hardwired to your data model. Similarly, if you take BP also, there might be some BP access class will be there. There also this interface method will be there, save. But inside that method, it will handle all the BP related or customer related, vendor related entities. The method remains same. Okay, so when I say activation process, that means technically in the backend system will call this method technically. So you can put a breakpoint and debug this class as well at the time of activation. Once the final approver approves, then you put a breakpoint over here and you can start debugging this one. Okay, inside this method, it will have all the logic, all the entities related to material entities. It will, if you look at this one, it will read the data from your staging tables and it will prepare an API structures. Okay, and ultimately once everything is prepared, in the down somewhere it will call the save method again. You can see here there is a save method. So you can trace back. Someone said, okay, during the activations time, how I can debug that, or how I can troubleshoot technically. So you can put a breakpoint over here. Okay, so then this method will get called. If you go further down, again, there is something called a save method is there. Okay, so here, ultimately it calls your material BAPI. No, this is for, yeah, BAPI only. This is for your material type change. But in the down, you will have material BAPI. call MMD. So it will go here. And again, if you open this method, it will call your material dark API. So this is what you are preparing all your reading the data from your staging tables. It prepares all the API structures over here for your material description, plan data, then MARD, okay, and your valuation related data. Everything it will read from your staging tables, and it will prepare all these structures, and finally it will call material dark API to create the material or to update the material in your Maramarsi or active area table. This is what how the process works. This is the last point where it handovers your MDG data to your the standard BAPI. Okay, you no need to remember all these class names. The reason I just showed you, so if you know, okay, let's say for example, if you know the reuse area name, okay, for data model, this is the reuse area, okay, or active area. From here you can navigate, go to reuse active area and take this class name, and inside this particular class, one method I showed you, that is for your, which will get executed during your activation. When you perform a search application on your search UI, query method will get triggered. When you open a single record or display a record, read method will get triggered. So at different point of time, different methods will get triggered. Okay. Similarly, there is a method to perform the validations. There is a method to perform the derivations. Okay. And there is a method to perform your authorizations. If someone, you are getting an authorization error, then you can put a breakpoint over here, and it checks that all the authorizations over here, okay, whether you have authorization to this material, you have authorization at a plant level or not, okay, you have whether you have authorization at a valuation level or not, whether you have authorization to extend the material to a sales org or not, then storage location authorizations. So at every level this authorization checks will be performed. Okay, so this is the method responsible for validating your authorization checks. Okay, so these are the important methods. The other methods will get called internally to perform certain activities. But what is important is here your read, query, save, then derive, validate, check data. So these are the important methods. Okay, so that means now you, by this time you should have understood that when you are creating a data model using reuse approach, it just not only defining the data model entities and generate these things that will create your staging tables, but at the same time you need to create something called this kind of ABAP class. Okay, so let's say for example in our case, right, so in our data model, if at all I have to create this data model as a reuse data model, so then you need to go to this particular reuse active area under this particular data model, maintain some description, like let's say z prod underscore reuse some, this is any free text. What is important is the class that you associate over here is the important one. So you can create any z class over here, assign a z class, but this z class should be created as how you see the standard material access class. You need to create a z class and extend add an interface for that z class, and you need to implement all these methods. Save, enq, enq is not required. The bare minimum methods are save, query, read, and then check and derive. So these bare minimum methods you need to implement. Authorization checks and everything, it depends on your business requirements. So there is this kind of access classes are available for for BP, for article master, for EAM object. For finance, it's a flex mode. There is no need of any access class. Any questions?
In the flex mode, for finance, where this means activity gets performed like authorization check or saving
Yeah,
and all.
yeah. Very good question. Actually, in finance, since we don't have all these methods and this access class, the question is how these things will be handled in finance, right? So in finance case, SAP provided there is a something called that baddies are available. So those all these kind of things are handled in that baddie methods in finance. We will see, I'll show you that where those, but this kind of similar kind of thing is there for finance because it is a standard object. All these checks has to perform for finance as well, except storing the data at the time of activation, pushing the data to your active area. The rest, your authorization checks, your validations, derivations, and those things has to be done, right? So those things are done for finance as well, but not via access class. So SAP provided a baddie validate for validations and derivations to perform those things. SAP provided certain baddies. So you see already the implementation, standard implementation is available for finance object for in that particular baddies. So when we reach to the data quality topic, there I will show you that.
Oh, okay, okay, got it.
Okay, so now that's the reason you see this particular S-Flight data model, because for example you wanted to have your own access class, right? So SAP, there is an active area is already defined, so you can always refer this S-Flight access class, which is a generic one. So you can refer this class and accordingly you can code it for your access class if at all you are creating a custom data model, and that too if you wanted to use it as a reuse thing. Okay, uh, this is one way, because this building this particular class is not straightforward in the sense, so it requires some effort. You need to write some, there's a development effort required over here to implement all the methods, and inside the method you need to operate all, perform all the CRUD operations, read write for all the entity data, everything, right? So that requires some development effort. So since MMBP, all these are the standard objects, so SAP has to do this thing. Even your article master and EM objects also, these kind of access classes are available. But for custom objects, you think that, okay, do I really need to do all these developments? Is there any shortcut? So for custom objects also, either the recommended approach is you need to create the classes, something like this access class, and then assign it to your data model. That is there. That is the recommended one. But sometimes what people will do is they follow a different approach. They skip this access class. It look like a your flex data model only, but at the time of workflow, in the workflow at the time of activation, so what they will do is, so at the workflow level, what they do is in the last step, SAP provided some baddie. So they make use of that particular baddie, and they read the data from your staging and they push the data to your this one active area. They'll insert the data into the standard custom or active area tables. So that is also shortcut, but it works basically. If you don't need a, ultimately your requirement is at the time of activation the data has to move to my these so and so custom tables or active area tables, right? So that can be handled in many ways. One is using this access class, the standard approach. The other is there is a baddie, and you can also you all this staging data will be available over there inside that particular baddie. You can just read the data and just write that insert statements into your tables. So that also works. Okay, so I will, during the workflow topic, I'll show you that how we can handle that scenario. But for our example, in our case, we will go with a flex data model, which means we no need to create this access class. In case if at all you wanted to refer this access class, you can always refer this access flight data model or even material or BP access class, how they are coding, or you can put a breakpoint and debug and try to understand how the data gets stored. That's the reason I showed you that material access class until where it calls your BAPI. It's a standard one, so that's why they follow those multiple classes and everything. But ultimately, technically, the save method will get triggered. I can write the logic directly inside my save method as well. Okay, for the standard objects, they follow an approach, they follow a framework. So instead of directly writing that logic to call that API inside that save method, they have to handle a lot of standard processes, whether is there any material type changes there or not, whether there any logs are there. So they do all the lot of standard checks and everything. They modularize the code into multiple levels. Okay, so that's how. But for your custom objects, it won't be that much complicated. It will be straightforward. Ultimately, SAP provided that save method, whether you directly write the logic inside that or you call some other API and do the coding there. So that is up to your business needs and your coding standards. Clear? Any questions on this access class?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So now in our case, what we do is we don't wanted to create this access class. Okay, which means for now we are creating a flex model only. Okay, I'll just, is the name we provided. So not this one, right? We don't wanted to create this reuse area. I'll just delete it. Okay, so this is my data model. Now if you don't mention any active area over here, usually when you create something reuse area over here and assign a class, when you do a F4 over here, you will get to see the available reuse areas over here. But now since I wanted to create it as a flex data model, either you can leave it blank, this one, or else you can say MDG. Both are same. When you say MDG or leave it blank, then this model will be considered as a flex model. Okay, so you can just leave it blank also, or just say MDG. It's a keyword MDG. Okay, after this, you can see here there is something called prefix. Okay, so there is something called prefix over here. Okay, so this prefix is when system generates the staging tables and the fields and everything, right? Just to bring the uniqueness to your generated objects, you can add some unique prefix over here. Anything like, let's say Z, I say Z PM, product master, something like this. You can say ZPM or any prefix. So what happens is, for the generated objects, it should not happen that system will generate one object for a different data model and it will generate one more object for your model. Both names should not match. So that's the reason, just to bring your uniqueness to your generated object, I will use one prefix and the other person will use different prefix, so that this prefix will be added in the backend to your name for the generated object. It brings the uniqueness to your generated objects. So that's why we use this prefix or the namespace. Okay, after that, something called package is there. So let's see if there are any packages out there which I can use. Okay, Z. Okay, I'll just use one of this existing package. So you know this, this is a prefix, right? So ZMDG demo, I'm just using. Otherwise, you know, all the generated objects should get stored into some package, right? Like you create a program or class or table, we will assign a package. So you can create this package in CIT and you can just simply assign that package over here. So all the generated staging tables uses this particular package. Okay, so that's it at a data model level. This is what the information you provide: your name, your data model, provide some description, whether it tells you whether it is a act, a reuse or a flex, prefix, and some package. Okay. After this, scroll right. You see username who actually created this or last modified this, the created date and timestamp, and there is something called active version. So in this active version, there are three different values are there. Okay. So now here, what are those three values? One is none initially, then you have same, then different. So these are the three values. We don't change anything, it will be changed by, depends on the scenarios, this status will be assigned. So when none will be there, initially when you are creating first time a data model, until you do a first activation, till the first activation, the status will be none. Here in our example, we are creating one data model. I haven't activated it. So that's the reason the status will be none until you activate this data model first time, for the first time. This is just like you can compare, you are creating one ABAP program. When you go to SC38 and when you create a program, first time when you are creating until you activate that, what is the status? Can anyone tell? When you're creating ABAP program or class or something or table, did you notice that before activation first time, what is the status it shows?
Inactive.
New.
New.
First time it shows the status as new. I think its status is new. Okay.
Yeah.
Once you save it or once you activate that, the status will be active. And after that, again, you do some more changes and save it, the status will be inactive. Right? It's the same thing over here. First time when you, until you activate, the status will be none for your data model. Once you activate the data model, the status will be same. And after that, if you again modify this with some other changes, the status will be different until you activate it again. Once you activate the data model after your changes, the status will be set to same. So from then onwards, the status will be toggle between same and different. Again, it never reaches to none status. Okay. So that we will see when currently we are actually creating a new data model. That's why the status is none. Okay. For other data models you see here, the status will be same. That means there is no inactive version. Same in the sense your inactive version is same as your active version. There is no different copies. When you say different, that means someone modified this particular data model and they haven't activated, which means there are two versions. One is an active version, one is an inactive version. So that's why the status here shows it as different. Okay, so fine. Now we just created one data model, and when you create a data model, you cannot activate this data model alone because there is nothing to create staging tables. Your staging tables always will create for the entity types, right? So you cannot a data model, at least bare minimum it should have one entity type. Okay, so that's where first you need to create under this data model one entity type. So now I reach to this entity type section.
One question, Akshay. For this reuse area MDG or active area MDG, there is no access class.
There is no access class. It's a keyword which will tell you that it's a flex data model.
Okay. So it is standard creation without any access class, that
Yes,
MDG.
yes, that's true.
If we try to create something like that, it will not be possible for us, right?
So when you are creating a class, right, or all you need to do is you need to go to this active area, define some name, create one Z class and assign link it over here and provide a name to that one, not MDG, some different name.
Right, but here we cannot simply create active area without access class, right? Here access class will
We
be
cannot create active area without an access. It's a mandatory field.
okay. Okay. So whatever we have MDG, that is standard provided. Right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So now I wanted to create entity types. So select your data model, go to entity types. Okay. So currently there are no entity types. You need to create a entity type. So click on new. Okay. So you need to name your entity type. So we need two entity types. In our example, we need two entity types. One for to the product general level, other one is the plant related entity. So the name can be anything which will accept up to 8 characters. Okay, so which is actually sometimes we feel it's a we cannot actually provide a name which will give you a meaningful thing with 8 characters, but no other option, you have to go with this. Okay, so it's not necessary that this entity type name should be starting with Z or Y, because at the top anyway it's a custom data model. Under this, whatever entity types you create, those are custom entity types only. But usually we use Z as a habit for any custom object to represent it's a custom thing. We always use that Z or Y. So that's why I'm just going with this Z. So what I will do is I'll just create a Z product. Z product. I'm naming my entity Z product. That means here, whatever I said here, the name I'm giving Z product. My first entity type. Okay, so when you're creating an entity, there are some other settings you need to provide at entity type level. Just like at the data model level, we provide the prefix, package, reuse area, or the reuse area. So likewise, at entity type level also, you need to provide some information over here, some settings. And once you provide here some settings or some details, then you need to go and maintain the attributes under this entity type. Okay, so out of these settings, the first and very important setting is storage and use type. Okay, that means when you are creating an entity type, you need to categorize that what is the type of this particular entity. So there are 4 types are available. Okay, so first, storage use type. So this is very important setting at the entity type level. Storage use type, or sometimes people will call in short SU type. SU type also. Okay, so what are those categories? 1, 2, 3, 4. SU type 1, SU type 2, SU type 3, SU type 4. Okay, so I need to categorize whatever the entity type I'm creating, whether it's a type 1 or type 2, type 3, type 4. So how do we decide whether it's a type 1 and type 2 or type 3 or type 4? Okay, so let's take your material master. So what is the parent table in your material master? Entire material master, what is the parent table?
Mara.
Mara is your parent table, right? So because whenever you are creating a material, first an entry should land into this particular Mara table. After this, the other tables like your Marcy or MVKE or MBEW, all these material related tables, MARD, MLG1. Likewise, you have bunch of tables, right? So this we call it as a parent table. I can create a material with only this entry, and all other childs are optional for me. But I cannot create a material only with this particular entry and without this. That is not at all possible. So that is the reason we say this is a parent, and the remaining tables, these are childs for us. These are just an optional things for us, but this is very, very important, mandatory. Okay, your material data. So the first entry will get added into Mara, and then if you are creating a plant, so that data of the material, there will be a foreign key relationship as well. Whatever you are extending, it will go and validate whether that material exists in this table or not. Whether this, when you are extending it to a sales org, whether that material extend available here it or not. So that checks will be done. So there is a parent and child relationship. Similarly, in data model also, you have your SU type 1, which is equivalent to your parent, and you have your SU type 4. Okay, so you need to identify in your master data, you need to identify what is my parent entity. You will have one parent entity which will identify uniquely your master data. So that we call it as your type 1 entity. And the other ones we call it as a type 4. So in data model also, you have one SU type 1 entity, that is nothing but the name of the entity is material. Under this, you have multiple SU type 4s, one SU type 4 for plant, one SU type 4 for your sales, one SU type 4 for your valuation. So likewise, one SU type 4 for your storage location. So you can have one parent and multiple childs. Okay. Is this clear to everyone? So since we are creating this first entity, and I wanted to define or categorize this entity as my parent entity, that is nothing but type 1. Okay. Now, whatever the entity that you are creating it as a type 1, system will generate database tables. Even for type 4 also, system will generate the database tables. Okay, so other 2 and 3 we will discuss later in the session, but for now we just only discussed about type 1 and type 4. Okay, so the description says here, I'm talking about the second part of the description, generated database tables. That means when you activate this data model for this particular entity type, system will generate a database table. Similarly, you create a child entity for plant. For that entity also, system will generate a database table. Okay, so then what is the difference? Now you see something called a changeable via change request. Here it says changeable via other entity type. Okay, first let's understand what is a change request. In MDG, you always, the first term you hear is the change request concept in MDG. Okay, so this change request concept we will be discussing in detail in process modeling topic. Okay, so we have a topic called process modeling. So there we will discuss the change request. But for now, for your at very high level, just to visualize what is a change request. So I'll just explain at very high level what is the change request process. Okay, in very simple terminology for comparison purpose, let's take an example. As an employee, you wanted to travel from one location to some other location on a business trip. So what you do, you log into your travel portal, right? As an employee, first employee will create a travel request. Travel request. System will generate one request number 1000 is my travel request number. Under this travel request number, you will provide your employee details, then the dates, and then whatever the profit center, cost center, and then the reason for this trip. So all the details you will provide. And okay, and you submit this request. This request will go to your manager, right? So manager will get this 1000 request, travel request. He will open that request. He will review the data, and if the request, if the details are correct, he'll approve from his side. So once manager approves, it goes to the finance department, the same travel request number, and finance team will review from the financial aspects whether the cost center is correct or not and everything. And finally, once he approves that request, finally it goes to your travel department, and then travel department will contact you for validating all the dates and the everything, and finally they book the tickets. and your request 1000 request will be closed. So in this entire process, right from employee till you open the request until it get closed, you can track and trace that the status of your request using this particular request number. Just like you order in online portal, also some in Amazon or somewhere, right? So you will get a unique number, and you will use that number for to quote any queries or anything, the status or anything, right? The same way, change request also you can assume that something like this. So when you are creating a master data, you are creating a material, so system will generate one unique number for this creation purpose. Just like I show you here. I wanted to create a material. Okay, so I'll choose some request type. So I'm creating a material here. I'll fill all the data. See at the top, there is a number got generated, right? So this is the request number, and it can either approve or this request number can get rejected also. But I can trace the status of this process using this request number. So in MDG, you cannot maintain any master data without this change request number. For every change that you do via MDG process, this number will be associated. Now it got generated, it created 801. Now what I will do is, I will go to search application. I will try to edit another material. This 22 material, I'm just trying to edit this, initiate a change process for this particular material. I'll click on edit. As soon as you click on edit, it generated again another number, 802. So 801 is for this particular material creation process. Okay, and 802 is for another material change process. If I create a BP, the next number will be 803. So this number is unique for every change. I create one material, system generated one number. Then I edited the same material. It generated another number. It again, I did some more extensions to that same material. It will generate one more number. So likewise, right from the creation till today, if your material undergoing with some 10 times some changes, there will be 10 request numbers will be generated. And you can track and trace those 10 requests and what changes has been made as part of this request, everything that you can see. Okay, yesterday someone saying that, okay, how do I know that whether if I reject a material creation, okay, so how do I know why this request got rejected or something, right? So you can, there will be reasons why you are rejecting this, and usually we will ask the business to maintain some notes as well, if required as an attachments. So this entire number, though you reject or discard your request, so the data will get deleted from your staging table, but this data information gets stored into different tables, and that information will be there in the entire life cycle. So you can, using this number, you can look at why this request got rejected or all the details. Is this clear to everyone? What is change request? So we will be discussing all the CR configurations and everything, change request or CR configurations in process modeling topic. Since I need to explain here in this particular entity type, it says that changeable via change request. So I just introduced this term change request at very high level, but we will discuss in detail the change request configurations are there, which is very, very critical. One of the important configuration in MDG. Okay, so those configurations generally done by functional consultants, but we can also do. Okay, so now what it says is changeable via change request. That means if I select this type 1, this data always, the attributes under this particular entity will always changeable via change request process. Without change request process in MDG, I cannot change this data. That's the reason it says changeable via change request and generated tables. System will generate the staging tables. For type 4, what it says is changeable via other entity type. This also changeable, but not directly. But what it says is via other entity type. That means basically your child entities always you will change in the context of your parent. Okay, which means you take this example, right? If at all I wanted to change the plant data, first system will lock your material, the corresponding material. It will lock your type 1 object, and then it will lock the corresponding plant object, and you can edit the data. So technically speaking, you are changing here in the context of a particular material. I cannot simply go and without any material, I cannot edit this data. These changes always will be tied up to your parent. So that's the reason here it says via other entity type. Changeable via other entity type means the dependent entity, the parent entity. Your changes has a dependency with the parent entity. That's what this particular thing says. Type 4. That's it. But in at very high level, what you can remember is always your parent entity will be you can categorize as type 1, and your child entity will be categorized as type 4. For both the cases, system will generate the staging tables, and both type 1 and type 4 data you can always change via change request process. That's it. Okay. Any questions with the type 1 and type 4 categorization?
For storage type 4 entity changeable via other entity type, uh, uh, means can we change everything or certain attributes only uh, for that entity? Means suppose we in the material, suppose we assign the plant, right? And in the plant, we can write suppose certain fields only we can change with respect to this
Yes.
material, right? Not all.
Yes.
Huh.
Yes. That is possible. You can basically you wanted to say, see, there are two types. One is either you can provide a configuration such a way that you can the person can edit all the attributes under that particular entity. The other will you can control the you can restrict that maybe only out of 10 attributes at this level only these three will be editable and remaining will be read only. That's what you are saying, right?
Yeah, yes. And we cannot create a new one, right? Directly with respect to material. That is possible. Suppose for this material, I want a new plant, which is a type 4. So,
See, yeah. Uh, at runtime, adding a new plants or extending to a new plants is a runtime thing. For that one, there is no need of creating a new entity and all this stuff. You got the point, right? You have your Mara and Marcy tables. Those are the backend tables one time you create. Now, I create 100 materials or 1000 materials. The material data gets stored into Mara table, plant data gets stored into Marcy table. Same way, I create one entity for parent entity, one child entity, and I activate the data model. So there will be one staging table for parent entity, one staging table for child entity. Then at runtime using the UI, I can create 1000 materials, and 1000 materials I can extend to 10,000 plants.
okay, so at the one-time configuration, we can create, right, those
Yes.
type 4,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then at change request level, we just assign it to the
Yeah,
material
so
that we are.
change request level configuration will come into picture later when we are discussing about. So, but in the change request level, you can say, okay, these attributes can be mandatory, these optional. So those kind of things that we will discuss later in UI modeling and process modeling topics.
No,
Okay,
my question was this type 4, okay. So this type 4 cannot be created completely using change request, right? Or means
no,
that's my
this is also you can edit this data using change request only. Without change request, you cannot edit this data. But what it says is other entity type means this can be changed in the context of your parent entity. That's it. So when I say something like this, let me give you an example why they, instead of change request, they mentioned other entity. Okay, so you have your type 1 and this is your child SU type 4. Okay, now when if at all I have to edit this data or I have to edit this data, system will generate a change request number for sure. Okay, now after this, for example, I can have one more type 4 where this is a parent for that particular type 4. Take example of material, plant, storage location. Storage for the parent for your storage location is under a plant, and this plant is under a material. So to edit the storage location data, first I need to lock my parent plant. So that is nothing but I need to lock this one. To lock this, I need to lock my parent like this. So this is how the hierarchy flows. That's why, see, this is also a child, this is also a child. So what the description says is this data can be changed via other entity. What is that other entity? This one. And this can be changed via other entity, that is nothing but the parent entity, this one. But if at all I have to edit this data or this data or this data, system will generate a change request number. In MDG, you cannot change any data without a change request number.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so we will see all these different use cases once we complete this particular data model. Yeah, but feel free to, don't hesitate. If you have any doubt, I will try to explain it again. But at very simple terminology, when you are creating an entity type, you need to choose whether it should be a parent or child. For material master, I cannot have two parents. You will always have one parent for material master. For BP, I will have always one parent. So under one data model, when you are representing this master data for your entire master data, you will have always one parent. You cannot have two parents. Childs are optional. You can have a parent without a child. I can create a data model without a child SU type 4. I can create one data model just only with type 1. Type 4s are optional, but I cannot create a data model with type 4s. You cannot have a child without a parent. Okay, so under a data model, you will have one, identify one your parent and categorize that as a type 1 when you are creating a brand new data model. Rest all the things are like the childs only, remaining all things. Clear?
Yes, yes, clear.
Okay. Okay, fine. So for our first we identified our parent, that is, so I am categorizing it as type 1. Okay, this validity you can ignore, this is not at all required. There is something called data element over here. Okay, so for here the significance of this data element is, so let's take our example. Our data model is ZT. Under ZT, we created Z product is the entity. Okay. Now, take corresponding to this one, how you are visualizing your staging table. So you will have a staging table. That staging table will have material number, then material type, material group, and let's say industry sector. This is your staging table with material number as key field. This is what we are visualizing. Okay, now when you create your entity here, especially your type 1 entity, okay, so the key field here, this entity name itself will become your key field. That means system will take the name of this entity and it will add it as a key field in the generated staging table. And all other attributes are will taken from your attributes like material type, material group, and industry sector. So when you have a data model entity like this type 1 entity, and when you activate your data model, there will be a staging table that will get created. And when system is creating the staging table, since it is a type 1 entity, this name will become one of the key field in your generated table, and all other attributes will be taken added as a normal non-key attributes. Okay, now since I'm saying this is my it will generate a key field, right? So for you need this will act as a key attribute. You need to maintain the data element for this one. So that data, because here I need a data element, right? I need a data element for every field here. How system knows that what is the data element that is to be assigned to the generated staging tables? So I need to assign data element here. I need to assign a data element here, here, and here. Okay, so that's the reason it is asking to maintain the data element, especially for your type 1 entity. For other entities, you are not supposed to maintain this. Okay, so I'm just entering my data element as Matner. I'm just taking the standard data element. Okay, so with this, I will talk about the other settings later. Okay, now we will come back to this one again. So what I'm doing is the bare minimum attributes like your entity type, and then if it is a type category, and if it is a data element, this one. Another important one is key assignment. I will talk about this little later. So this we will for now I'm just using the default value, and scroll down. There is something called description. For your entity description, I'm saying it's a product master. So you just maintained these values. Other things we will come back later. Okay, so once you provide this information at your entity level, then go back to your under these attributes. Here you can just add the remaining attributes. Click on new entry. So I'll take some attributes from Mara table. So material type, MTART attribute, and the corresponding data element as well. The description. I'll talk about all these the remaining properties later. Once we activate and I show you the staging table, then we will again come back to this and we will discuss. So then industry sector. Material group. Okay, I just added. So likewise, you can keep on adding how many attributes that you want. So tell me one thing, once I activate this data model, how many the staging table will create with how many attributes?
One with 4 fields.
Yes. So staging table with 4 fields. Out of 4 fields, this is the key field. These are the non-key fields. Okay. So now we maintained a data model. We created one entity type of SU type 1 parent entity. We maintained these 3 attributes. So this is what required bare minimum to create a data model. Now save your changes. Okay, so we need to activate this data model. Now I can activate this data model. Go back. So now you see this is your data model, right? With the status none, because we haven't activated till now. So now I'll select this data model, click on activate. This is the time system will take your definition of data model, entity type, everything. It will generate, create the staging tables automatically. In the down, you can see the progress, generate database structures. It also creates some structures, internal tables and everything that we will discuss little later. For now, the focus is on the staging tables.
Key field will be data element, right? Every time.
No, data element will be there for key and non-key fields. But
No,
we need to
no. At entity type we define data element, so it will like matter we define.
yes,
So
yes, yes. So
for
that is a
example,
key. That is a key field. Okay, I
okay,
will show
okay.
you. I will show you in this one. So now data model got the activated. So now see the status changed to same. So not this one. Ours is JT, right? JT only. Yeah. So the status changed to from none to same. So it is, there is no inactive version. It's an active version. Now I wanted to look at the staging table for this data model. So what you can do, you can go to the same program, USMD underscore data model. So we can look at the corresponding T code as well. But most of the times we go with this program only. Okay. So either you can go with program or you can directly enter the T code. So select this particular program and run this model. Okay, select your data model, that is ZT, and execute. So this is your entity and this is the generated staging table. Okay, so when you double click, it will take you to the staging table that got created. And now let's explore the fields. It got created more, but we will see what is those. Mandate, anyway, we know for every table it will create. This is the field, key field, and you see the naming convention. This one MD, this will get added for all the fields. Along with, after that, ZT is your data model. This is your entity name. So totally, like, I mean, this is my key field name. And this is the data element I maintained at this particular entity level. Okay, so this is one. This is my direct field and concatenated with the data model. This is again another attribute. This is again another attribute. So these four picked up from my data model and the type 1 entity. And by default, this will get added by MDG framework because we need to know whether it is an active record or inactive record. Obsolete, whether it will add whether this record is obsolete or not, though we don't use, by default system will add this one. Along with that one, especially for your type 1 entity, system will add these four fields: created on, created by, changed on, changed by. We need to know who created, who changed, and the date side. So that's why system will add these fields as well. So this is your staging table for your type 1 entity. Okay. Any questions on this?
No, sir.
Clear, right, everyone? Or feel free to ask if you have any questions, or if something you are not able to follow, I can explain it again. So what we have done, we created one data model. Under data model, we selected one entity, created one entity, we categorize that as my parent entity. Then under this entity, we added some attributes. That's it. And then finally, we activated the data model. Okay, fine. Now, after this, let's go to edit You can add again one more attribute and save your changes and activate your data model. That new attribute will get reflected on your staging table again. Okay, so after this, you have something called one of the important. See, this validity and this one, we don't actually use at all, these two things. Okay, and even hierarchy also. So you can ignore these three fields. This is very important, key assignment. Okay, and this setting especially applicable only for your type 1 entity, not for any other types. Okay, so what it says is there are four types are there here. So this will decide what how your key behavior should look like. Key behavior in the sense the key field of behavior on the UI. So let me show you here. I'll go to material, create. Okay. Now look at this is your key field. What it says is here the behavior when you open any create material, by default it proposes some number. So we'll discuss what is this dollar symbol, but it proposes some value, key value, and this is in editable mode. Okay. Now I don't need this number. I want my own number. Okay. Just like your external material numbers, you can delete it and then enter your the way that you want the key field value. So this is one behavior. Okay, so now let's look at this behavior, compare here. The first one says is key cannot be changed, no internal key assignment. So that means no internal key assignment means basically when you open this UI, system doesn't propose any key field here. It will be empty. Okay, and what it says, key cannot be changed. That means once you enter some key value, let's say AXT, some key value, and hit enter, this field will become automatically read only. So you cannot edit that. It will allow only once to maintain the data. Next time it won't allow. I will show you. I have one UI, example UI created. So I will show you this behavior. So let's take this example. This is one custom UI. So here initially there is no key. That means look at this behavior. No internal key assignment. System doesn't propose any key behavior. But once I enter here some value, hit enter, this field become read only. Because I need to maintain this. Okay, but this field become read only. I cannot edit this data. So if you need this kind of behavior, you need to select this option. Key cannot be changed. No internal key assignment. The other one is internal key assignment only. That means system will propose one key and it will be always read only. You cannot edit that key. Here it always proposes internal key. And this one will be no internal key assignment. That means system doesn't propose any internal key, but key can be changed. Key can be changed means just like this one. It is allowing you to change, and again I can do some changes, and again I can delete and I can change it again. So until you submit the request, right? So it will allow you to you can do the changes to the key. And the last one will be internal assignment is possible, key can be changed. This is what used for material master. For material master data model, for the type 1 entity, material entity, this is the setting that is used. What is this setting? Initially it says internal key, it will propose an internal key, and after that you can change the key again and again. So that is what exactly equivalent to this behavior. So here I'll close this. Again, if I try to create a new material, Initially, system proposes some key. Okay. So now look at this behavior. What it says is no, okay, last option. Internal key assignment possible. That means system will propose some internal key and key can be changed. So the same thing, system propose some internal key. I can replace this with something and I will hit enter. Okay, again it is still editable. I can change this and again I can do some more changes. So likewise, so this is the behavior. So you no need to write any ABAP logic or anything. When you are creating your custom, see for the standard data model, we don't change this behavior. We will, for the standard models, whatever the behavior is there, we go with that one only. But when you are creating a custom data model, you can take a call, depends on the behavior, you can choose the right one. But to achieve that thing, you no need to write any ABAP logic. If you do the right setting over here, automatically when you create a UI application corresponding to this data model, this setting will be considered by the framework itself. Is this clear to everyone? These four options.
If the key is already existing, suppose manually we change, so it will give error, right?
No, I didn't understand that. Can you come again?
Yes, if we manually entered the key, suppose 1, 2, 3, 4, number, material number, and if it already existed in the system, right? So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
will give the
that it will give you an error that this material is already existing.
okay. So this user will not know this, right? Means which are the materials existing in the system and not.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
you know, so user will go to this UI. He will
uh,
enter some material number. Let's say
uh,
he got a mail that he wanted to create this material. So he
uh,
will enter the material number. If the material already existing, right? Just like in MM01, if you try to create an existing material, it will give an error message. The same way here also, whatever you entered, whether if there is any material exist, it will throw an error. This material is already existing.
okay, okay, okay. Got it. And suppose we have to use the number range and all, then we use that internal only, right? Existing.
Number range, yes, yes. But with number range concept here, I'll explain tomorrow. So
Okay.
you are right partially, but
Uh,
there is some MDG flavor also I need to talk about on that one. But for this internal key, right? So let me show you again here. So when I open this create material, by default it proposes some number you with some dollar symbol. If you notice this, right? When I first time when I enter into create,
yes.
so that is coming from the number range only. This number is coming from some number range object only. But what is this number? What is this dollar symbol? So I will explain the story behind this in tomorrow's session.
Okay, sure, sure.
Okay, but for now, the point here I'm trying to highlight here is there are four key behaviors that you can actually configure, depends on the your requirement, especially when you are creating a custom models. So how the key behavior should look like, so that you can actually, by reading this description itself, you can understand wherever internal key is possible is there. That means in this case and in this case, second and fourth case, there will be some number range associated. System will propose that number by default. Whether I should be able to edit it or not, that the first statement will tell you. Whereas in first and third cases, there is no internal key. That means you no need to configure any number range because there is no internal key assignment. It will be an external number. User has to input that. But once user has provided that input, whether he can change it, it will allow you to change or not. That depends on the first statement. So these are the four possible settings. By default, this is what it takes. No internal key assignment, key cannot be changed. This is a default setting.
Okay, got it.
Okay, fine. So I will stop here today, and we will continue regarding the other property settings over here. Along with that one, that child entity, how to create the child entity and the attributes, so that we will continue our discussion tomorrow. After that, we will also discuss about other two options, 2 and 3. So once we discuss these things, our most of the data model topic is completed. Okay, so I'll stop here today, and if anyone have any questions, we can actually discuss on any topic in general from MDG point of view, or whatever that we discussed so far, right? So if you have any questions, we can discuss. Okay, fine. If no further questions, thank you all. We'll catch up tomorrow.
Sure. Thanks,
Thanks,
Akshay.
Akshay.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Akshay. Thank you, Akshay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.